In the Christian world, perhaps the most famous pilgrimages are to Jerusalem, Rome, Compostella, and Canterbury. Less well known, but perhaps in the 21st century of equal, if not greater importance, is the pilgrimage to the shrine of St. Michael at Meadowhall near Sheffield. We're actually going to do just the last section, which starts in the centre of Sheffield and is known as the Five Wiers Walk. This walk will take us about 5 miles alongside the banks of the River Don, through what used to be, and still is to a certain extent, the heart of the steel industry of Sheffield. After a rather unprepossessing start, we may find ourselves in a surprisingly rural environment. Sheffield Council have been doing a lot of work over recent years developing this walk, but just now, after only a few hundred yards, we have to leave the bank and walk through the wicker, or wicker as they call it locally. But we can soon join the river again here, and we'll actually walk under that arch there, which goes under the railway line, which used to be an electrified line between Sheffield and Manchester, which some southerner decided to close. But again, we're soon back out on the road. We can have a look here at the first of the Five Wiers. This, I think, is called Sanderson's Weir. And here, just a quick look back to see how far we've come from the city. This is a section that is still under construction, or was when I was there, and we can have a look across the river to Tommy Ward's. So when this work is completed, we'll be able to cross the river on this bridge here to the other side. But to get to the other end of that path, that new path, we have to make a diversion round all these buildings here. And it looks as though we still do some overseas trade with France, Germany and Turkey by the look of it. We're still on our diversion here, but we can look back through these arches to the other end of that new path. So eventually we'll be coming along the river across there, right in the middle on that new path. Sheffield has been famous for the making of steel since at least the 14th century, when one of Chaucer's pilgrims is described as carrying a Sheffield twitchel in his hose. And here's another railway line. This one comes in from the north. Now we're still not really back on the riverbank yet, but just there is an all-day breakfast cafe if you're hungry by now. We're going now to get back onto the riverbank on the Five Wiers Walk to Meadowhall. You may have noticed there that we're now sharing this path with the Trans-Pennine Trail. Although we're never more than about 20 yards away from industry and its associated noise, we're coming to a rather nice countryside looking section of the river. The wildlife don't seem to mind. The proximity of iron ore, streams for power and suitable grinding stones made Sheffield an ideal centre for steel making. We just look back along the path that we've walked to this point, and we find here that before the factories arrived, this was probably a residential area. There are still factories around, but a lot of this land is now used as a nature reserve. And this is a rather interesting seat. In the 16th century, Sheffield began to specialise increasingly in making cutlery, with the arrival of Flemish immigrants, and the following century, in 1624, a company of cutlers was established, Weir number 2. In the 1740s, Benjamin Huntsman, a Sheffield man born to German parents, made huge improvements in the steel-making technique at Handsworth in the east of the city. Huntsman was a mechanic and an expert in making steel springs and pendulums for watches, but was unhappy with the quality of the steel. His new steel-making process involved the use of a crucible, but his high-quality steel was rejected by the cutlers of Sheffield, who refused to use his steel on the grounds that it was too hard to work. Huntsman exported his steel to France, and cutlers there made it into cutlery which they exported back to England. This cutlery outsold Sheffield cutlery, and the Sheffield cutlers then started to use that steel. Another railway line there coming in, I think, from the east, and after a little diversion we're back on the riverbank. Steel-making improvements continued in Victorian times, particularly with the development of the Bessemer process in the 1850s. A further major event in the history of steelmaking was the development of stainless steel in around 1903. Sheffield was a major centre for the manufacture of armaments during the First and Second World Wars, and was a target for enemy bombing, suffering much wartime damage. Another little diversion away from the riverbank now, and there are still some names that people may recognise. Industry is packed so tightly along some banks of this river that I'm not sure it's going to be possible to do the full 100% walk along the bank. We must be over halfway there now, and we've come to another nice little section. Incidentally, at around the same time as Huntsman was making his cutlery steel, Sheffield plate was developed. Sheffield plate is made by enclosing a sheet of copper inside 2 sheets of silver, fusing them together and rolling them out. Sheffield plate was known and used throughout the world, but was ultimately superseded by the electroplating process, which was developed around 1840. In 1700, before the steel industry really got started, the population of Sheffield was 5,500. By 1800 it was 31,000. Today it is somewhere near 500,000. We come now to our last detour from the banks. That's a pretty good dead end there. We're out now on the main Sheffield to Rotherham road. The outposts of the Meadowhall shopping centre are just over there, with plenty of eating places if you are now hungry. Now we just have to cross the road here and rejoin the river bank by going in there. We're getting very near our destination, and here are some secret symbols left by previous pilgrims to make sure we take the right way. We're going to go under there shortly, but first to look back up the river to see where we came from, and we'll proceed now towards the site. I can already see the twin towers, pepper pot towers I think they're called. They're very much like the ones at Southall Cathedral. The river now continues its journey towards the North Sea, accompanied by that little duck there. We'll see in a moment our final weir. But we are now going to leave the river bank and head towards the sanctuary of St. Michael. There's the first indication, so let's make our way up there. This religion, like many others, is based on shop now, pay later. And of course we have to go upwards to the collection point to receive our final reward. We shall find and be reassured by the fact that there are plenty of other pilgrims here with us. The bas-reliefs decorating this sanctuary remind me of the ones on St. Mark's in Venice. So surrounded by this very modern architecture, we now enter the inner sanctuary. As with all beliefs and religions, the essential thing to have is faith, and here is a little boutique where you could buy some.